Missed an episode of your favorite podcast? Choose from over a decade of content in our archives, not just the latest episode. All free at GCNlive.com.
This is your call to action. Get prepared, America. Economy, survival, energy, disasters. This is USAPrepares.com. Informative radio, educational radio. Interact now by emailing instructor@usaprepares.com or text at 434-390-7953. Class, please take your seats. Now, your instructor, Vincent Finelli.
Everyone all set, cocked, locked? Here we go. Your dial is set correctly to USA Prepares. Thank you for being in class with us today. Jason's engineering the broadcast in Minnesota at Genesis Communications Network. I'm Vincent Finelli. And if you'd like to call us, we'll pay for the call. Telephone number is, 866-582-9933, 866-582-9933. Telephone listen line, 712-770-9418, 712-770-9418. Now, that number is only active for USA Prepares while we are live, which is between the hours of 9 a.m. and 11 a.m. Central Time. Today we're going to be broadcasting with Cathy in Ohio, and she's a homemaker. She was a student. She has risen to become an instructor at USA Prepares, and she is going to teach us about living more frugally. She's going to teach us about dehydrating and helping us with ways that we can do things that maybe we haven't done before during this corona panic. And I'm especially interested in learning about dehydrating foods. So, for example, we've been encouraging all of you to grow your gardens for 9 years now. And no change. We still want you to do that. We'd like you to get some seeds, and we'd like you to experiment with gardening if you haven't already done so. And there's a rule that you must adhere to. And the farther away your garden is from your kitchen door, the less you're going to maintain it, the greater the possibility of a complete failure of your garden is. So you want to keep it close to your kitchen door. You want to be able to tend it, water it, weed it, whatever you need to do, and pick the produce from it. So the closer, the better. And Cathy's going to teach us a lot about how to live frugally. Welcome, Cathy.
Hi. Hi, Vincent.
Hi. So, Cathy, where would you like to start with today's class? Do you have any an order that you'd like to start in, or do you want to start with dehydration of produce?
I would like to talk about that. I will touch briefly on the sprouts again. I had a couple more things I forgot to mention. I guess before I go into that, I guess if I can kind of maybe say the mindset that I use briefly, if that's okay.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Okay. I guess what I feel right now is that, and I've felt this way for quite a while, is that we should be buying necessities right now. And forget about the new shoes and the new clothes and all that. Buy necessities, look at what you ran out of maybe, or what you should have had more of in this situation. And when we are able to get the supplies, when things go back to whatever our normal is, or whenever we can get those things, try to stock up on those things. One of the things I have done for years now is every time I get my money for groceries, I take at least $20 and I just put it aside in like an envelope, and I mark it kind of like an emergency, grocery thing. And so let's say, for instance, I'll put $40 or $50 every month. That goes into for things like this situation. Or if there's something that comes up that you're unexpected, that all of a sudden you've had to buy more groceries or things like that. So really in 6 to 8 months, you can have easily $500-600 in there. And then what I do is when I go grocery shopping, if I don't use all that I have, then I put that what I call for my bulk food. So if I have $25 left over or $30, I put that in there. And then when I go to the store, if I find something that is a great price or end of the season and I need that money, then I pull from there. So I'm always able to keep my cupboard stocked up that way. So those are a couple of things that I use. And I use cash. I put cash in a separate envelope in my wallet or a separate divider. That's what I use for groceries. And when that is gone, that's gone. Now, if I have to take other things for groceries, I will. But that way I know that I'm not spending my grocery money on something that's not supposed to be for groceries. So those are the few things that I have done, and it kind of to get me to the point that I had extra money. I had a few $1,000s really saved up before this whole thing started over the period of a few years. So that was kind of what I wanted to say about how I got to where I was more prepared just by saving ahead of time.
Okay. Cathy, I'm looking at the screen right now. I just want to let you know we have a 2-second delay between me and the Genesis Communications Network. I cannot see the delay between you and Genesis Communications Network. So I just want to let you know that if I appear to be abrupt or interrupt you, it's not that I'm trying to. It's just that this delay makes it very, very difficult. And during the next break, I will reconnect and see if I can make some of this delay go away. But at the university, there's a term for what you are talking about, and that term is constrained optimization. And what that really means is in a situation where you've got some limits to, well, how much money do you have, and what circumstances are there around that money, and do they change? How do you maximize or optimize your situation given those constraints? And that's exactly what you're talking about. You're saying if you have some extra money, it goes into a fund or an envelope for emergencies. And that's a great way of living. Now, we live the same way. We do. And we've lived that way for a long time. My dad taught me when I was very, very young, maybe around 10 years old, that he opened a savings account with me put $5 in the account, and then it was my job to make that grow. So I learned at a very young age about saving, but not everybody has the good fortune of learning about saving. So class, you just learned about it. If you haven't done it, you just learned how to do it. It's really simple. What it really means is postponing some of your desires for right now and postponing them for later, so that when you do have a need later rather than a want later, you are prepared to act on that. Meaning, if it's on sale and it's a good value later, you're ready to jump on it. That's what Joey does. That's what I do. That's what most of our instructors do. Cathy, please continue.
Okay, I will talk about dehydrating. I think that it'll probably be good for most people to either, if you can purchase a dehydrator. I think we talked on Friday that you had a Nesco, and I may have misspoke. I had a dehydrator. I don't remember the name of it. It was the round one, but I don't think mine was as high-end as the Nesco. So maybe the Nesco is just as good as the one I have. So I apologize for that. But I do have one that's like square, and it's got trays that slide out. The good thing about a dehydrator is you can save so much food. And once dehydrated, it basically can stay fresh almost forever. The one thing I forgot to mention, and I know, Vince, you're going to love this, you can take a canning jar. You can buy the lid from Food Saver. I think you can get them off their website. I already have my sizes. You can get the standard lid, and you can get the wide mouth. It's like a cap that fits over the jar. What you do is you can take, you can even use a used lid. You don't have to have a new lid like you would do for canning. You can put let's say you have dried parsley in there. or you have raisins or something like that. You can put your food item in there, put a lid on the top, and you get these little caps from Food Saver. And I think Amazon carries them, but I believe they might be out right now. You put it on there, and you can either use a Food Saver or, which works better, which I've tried, I like it better, and I know you know what this is because you do car things, it's called a brake bleeder. And it's got a little pointy tip on the end. My husband had one, and I tried it several times in the last few months. You put that brake bleeder, the tip, into the lid, and you pump it up to at least 15, maybe go up to 18, and it seals that jar, and it lasts a long, long, long time. I've had very few failures because when you use the Food Saver, I don't think you can get as much suction. And there again, you're using your Food Saver a lot because now you're heating it up every time you use it. So I use the brake bleeder for all my herbs. You can do anything that you want to preserve that's dry. So if you have a good selection of canning jars and the lids, you can use the used lids as long as they're not bent. It works wonderful. And then you could just use a Sharpie and write on there what it is. And then you could open it, take some out, and just seal it right back up. And you're not using all the bags and everything, because the Food Saver bags that I use for meat and things like that, those are kind of expensive. So I just figured I'd mention that, Vince, because I know you probably have a brake bleeder.
Yeah, we do. And let's talk about what a brake bleeder is. Class, there are different kinds of brake bleeders. There's a manual kind. And think of it like a pump, but instead of putting pressure out, it creates vacuum. And what this will do is it has a hose, and you pump this thing with your hand. You like squeeze it, and there's a stationary handle and a movable lever, and you squeeze that with your hand, and with each squeeze, it creates more and more and more vacuum. And there are tips that go on the end of a very flexible hose, and one of them is kind of like a pointed tip with a rubber end on it, and you can, if there's a little tiny hole in a lid, for example, of a jar, you could use that brake bleeder to evacuate the air in the jar. So the air containing oxygen would cause the food that you've dehydrated to go bad. So if you remove more air, the food will last longer before it goes bad. That's what you're talking about, right, Cathy?
Absolutely, yes.
Okay. Now, how do you seal that hole? Because if you puncture a hole, now we're talking about taking a used, let's talk about like a pickle jar, a small pickle jar. I mean, it may be a 6 or 8 ounce or 12 ounce pickle jar, or a 24 ounce pasta sauce jar that has a rubberized built-in gasket on the lid. So we don't throw those away. We wash them out and we sterilize the jars. We make them really nice and clean. We save the lids. We keep the lids with the jars. So we're always ready to go with these used jars. So that's the kind of jar that Cathy is talking about, one that doesn't smell like pickles or garlic or something like that. And you can put your dehydrated food in there. But when we're going into a break, Cathy. When we come back from the break, would you tell us how do we seal that hole that's in the jar? Because the air will, as soon as we're done bleeding the air out of the jar with the break, as in B-R-A-K-E, brake bleeder, the air will rush right back in. How do we stop that from happening? Cathy in Ohio's with us, and we're talking about dehydrating foods and evacuating the air from common, once used jars with lids that have a rubberized seal on the inside that's permanently attached to the inside of the lid. Cathy, so once you have a hole in the top of that jar, how do you seal that up once you use a brake bleeder tool to evacuate the air from the jar?
Okay, you have to use a canning jar. You can't use a pickle jar. It has to have that. You know, when you can things, you have a standard size lid, and then you have the wide mouth that you have to buy to seal. Like if you buy them at wherever grocery store or farm store you use one of those lids. You put it on top of the jar. You put the cap that you buy from Food Saver on top of that. you can buy the standard size and the wide mouth size. And then you put the brake bleeder, there's a little hole, there's like a little stem and a hole that's on top of the food saver lid. You put your brake bleeder in there and you just hold it with your hand. My husband just had like the plastic tip that looks like a little funnel that goes down. That's all they do is put that in there. It doesn't puncture the lid of the standard lid. When you take it off, it sucks all that air out, and then it forms a seal as if you canned it, like a dry canning kind of method is really what it is. So you have to use, you can use a spaghetti jar as long as it's the lid is, or pasta sauce jar, I mean, as long as the lid sits on there with a standard canning lid or a wide mouth canning lid. So you never puncture a hole in that lid. That's how the air stays in there.
Okay.
And then
I have seen
right off.
Okay, I've seen another way using the spaghetti jars and the pickle jars. And what it is you puncture a little tiny hole, the equivalent of the point of a pencil, very tiny hole. And then you have a valve. It's kind of like almost like a piece of tape. And you put that piece of tape over the hole. And what happens is there's a flapper valve. It's like two pieces of tape. One is a sticky piece and the other is sticky only in a small area. And what happens is you put another lid, an adapter, over the jar lid after the jar lid is closed tightly by hand. Then you use that brake bleeder and it evacuates the air, and this little flapper valve lets the air out of the jar lid. And then when the vacuum stops, the seal closes. It's as simple as that. And then there's another way of doing that, which uses an air conditioning evacuation pump. Have you seen that, Cathy, with a pressure cooker? Have you seen one of those, or do you want me to explain that to you?
I've never used one, obviously, but I think I've seen other people use them, maybe my husband, but you can explain it because I'm not really that familiar with it.
Okay, so let's say you take a pressure cooker class, and you've seen those. So these are those aluminum two-piece or more pieces. There's like an aluminum pot with a lid, and the lid is secure, and usually there's a gasket. In many cases, there's a gasket. And there's one brand, All-American, that does not use a gasket. What you do is you take an evacuation pump from an air conditioning system. You could actually even use an old refrigerator compressor if you wanted to. And you adapt that with a hose that won't crush to let's say the pressure cooker. And the idea is you put let's say you have 6 jars of celery, and you want to vacuum seal them. You put the canning jar lids just lightly, just almost on the canning jar, but just off a little bit. So if you were to tap it, it would fall into place. So you have all of those the lids precariously perched on the jars. You have them inside the pressure cooker. You then turn on the vacuum pump, and the vacuum pump will suck the air out of the pressure cooker. And then you just, with a mallet, like a rubber mallet, you just tap the side of the pressure cooker, and all those lids fall into place. And they're held in place by vacuum. Then you release the vacuum from the lid, you take the lid off the pressure cooker, and then you screw on the retaining ring. And that works too. It's another way of doing it. So there are several ways, class, and probably the best thing you should do is look up on YouTube so you have a visual of what we're talking about. But yes, you can do it. Now, I'm not suggesting you spend $130 or so on a vacuum pump. I just happen to have one because we service air conditioning systems here. Cathy and I will be right back. We'll talk more about dehydrating. Class, Cathy was a student at USA Prepares, and she decided that she had some information to share. So she moved right up from student to instructor, and here's her first class on Worldwide Radio, USA Prepares. Cathy, thank you for doing that. What do you recommend that we grow in our garden right now so that we can preserve that by dehydration methods to last us, throughout the rest of the year? What's our best shot at having food for the rest of the year?
I have dehydrated. The easiest thing, especially if people are just beginning, are herbs. And herbs, even if you don't have a dehydrator, you can hang them, you can cut them and hang them. What I recommend is if you're going to cut like your herbs back and dry them, you can do them in the oven. You can do them if you've got like a patio table or picnic table, as long as you have something like a screen you can put over. You could do them in the sun. They take a little longer, but you can still do it. I don't want people not to think they can't dry their own. But if you're going to trim your herbs and keep them going and propagate them so they don't dry up, you would never want to take your basil plant, in my experience, and cut it all the way down and take the top because it needs the leaves. So you keep trimming the tops off. Like let's say your plant is 8 inches high, cut down the first 2-3 inches and take off like the big leaves, like of your basil, and start drying those. Even if you have to lay them out on your counter or on a paper bag or something, if you can put them in a dehydrator, just go ahead and break them up a little bit, put them in the dehydrator. I normally take the big stems off just because it dehydrates more evenly. But I would say herbs are probably the easiest thing to grow and to save. There also, I've done little cherry tomatoes. I've done I slice tomatoes very thin. Romas are good. They're kind of meaty, but they dehydrate well. I've done zucchini. The zucchini comes out beautiful, and then you can just rehydrate it, like for your vegetable soup or minestrone soup. It works very well that way. Apples and pears, and you can even do like peach skins if you're peeling peaches, like for a jam or a pie. You can take those and put a little cinnamon and sugar on them and save your peach skins. And those do very well. Peppers. And onions, too. Like right now, I have way too many onions that I'm going to be able to use, so I'm going to dehydrate onions. And you can do them on low in the oven if you don't have a dehydrator and you're trying to save money right now. You can read about that. There's one YouTube that you mentioned about getting online. The lady that I like to listen to, it's called Rain Country, R-A-I-N. And Country is the name of their YouTube, and it's how to vacuum seal dry goods. And she shows several different ways how to do it, but she also does a very simple way to do it with the brake bleeder. It's like a 10-minute YouTube, and she's got a lot of tips in there about dehydrating and making your own vinegars and soaps and all that. She's really a good person to listen to. But the things that I have done are the herbs, some of the vegetables. I've done apples. You can do berries too. They get a little dried out. You know, you could probably use them like in oatmeal or things like that when you're using a little liquid. But if you have a ton of that, you've got a ton of carrots and celery. And the other thing that I've learned, that the leaves from celery are actually more nutritious than the celery stalk itself. So I dehydrate my leaves, and when I make chicken soup or vegetable soup or potato soup, I put the leaves right in there, and the flavor, it just pops. It just is wonderful because it's my own homegrown celery. And then you just put in like a small handful or add it to your stock. But those are the things I have done. I'm probably forgetting a few, but I've had good success with everything that I've mentioned.
Cathy, let's talk about the temperature of the oven. Now, isn't it critical that you don't go too hot with the temperature when you're
Absolutely.
dehydrating?
Mine has a little display on it. I think the herbs are one of the lowest. I believe it's like maybe 100 is the most, maybe 110. You really don't want to go too high. You go a little higher on your vegetables, but your herbs you want to go low. And like it makes the thicker the item, than normally, a little higher the temperature, like with your produce. And I just check it. Like I turn it on for 6-7 hours. I try to start it in the morning. And if it looks like it's really kind of tough sometimes with the produce, because if you have to go through the night, you don't want to wake up the next morning and have everything be burnt or really dry. So if I can turn it off or turn it way down so it's still got some warmth to it, then I check it in the morning and then I turn it back up. But if you start it early in the morning and just kind of watch it and pull off the stuff that's dry, I only do it like maybe once or twice. But yeah, you don't want to have it too high, because you will some of your fruit or your vegetables will get like burnt or like dark spots on them. I've done that with some cherry tomatoes where I've forgotten about them. I think you can still use them if they're not burnt. You can just put them in a little warm water or warm olive oil, and then a lot of times they plump back up, and you can use them like on your pasta. Or I do them in the winter on my salads. I just take some dehydrated onions, and those are my tomatoes. I haven't had to buy any tomatoes.
Okay, so class, as a general rule of thumb, that on the low end, you're going to be at 110 to 115 degrees Fahrenheit for apples and apricots and bananas and things like that. When you get to mangoes, you might go to 135 degrees, guava, maybe 135 to 140. So there are charts on the internet, and you can look at them. But think of it like this. Let's say you were going to dry your hair with a hairdryer. If you set the temperature too high, you would hurt yourself. I mean, you would literally burn yourself. So it's better. And just like with a hairdryer, you can take a little longer on a lower temperature and it works fine. So be really careful with the temperature. And this is not going to happen instantly. It's not going to be dehydrated in 5 minutes. It can take 6 hours or more, depending on what you're dehydrating. And here's a tip from one of our former instructors. He has passed away. His name was Len Pence. And he used to say in his USA Prepare seminars and on the air with me that you all have a dehydrator. And what it is it's your window screen, the screen that's in your window to keep the bugs out, and it's your car. So you can take your window screen out, wash it very well, without damaging it, a detergent and water, rinse it really well, and put whatever you want to dehydrate on that screen. Put that screen in your car with the windows closed in the sun, and it will get warm enough to dehydrate food right then and there. Okay, so that's another way, because you know how hot your car gets in the sun, right? So that's just another way if you want to experiment with no cost whatsoever. So we talked about the Nesco, Nesco. They exhibited at our expo. I called them up and asked them if they would, because I really like their particular dehydrator. Works really well. It's a cylinder, and it has round trays, and you can stack as many or as few as you want. It has temperature control. The one we have, I bought before I invited Nesco to come to our expo. I invited them to come because I liked a particular product. We have another one that is, I believe it's an Excalibur. It's a square one, and these are available on eBay. You can buy them right now. You can buy vintage ones. You can, used ones. You can buy, cubicle types with doors and trays, as Cathy was describing. You can buy the cylindrical type, and they all seem to work just fine. I would avoid, if you could, the digital type that has a processor in it to control the temperature. I'd rather have a mechanical type, bimetallic, metallic temperature sensor. They seem to just work without any kind of problems. So nothing fancy, just a simple food dehydrator. Cathy, what about lettuce? Can you dehydrate lettuce? I haven't done that.
I haven't done it either. I could probably try it now that you mention it. What I have done with lettuce is, if I buy like the big containers of spring mix and they have like a clamshell in it, if you put in 2 or 3 paper towels, it will absorb that moisture. And then every day check it. If your paper towels are moist, you can either leave them out for a couple hours to dry and then put them back in, or you can put fresh ones in. I just leave them out because it's just moisture, and then I put them back in, and it will almost double the life of your lettuce because it doesn't get wet. You can do that with that. The other thing you can do is I have bought the bags. They're called green bags by Debbie Meyer. I got some on clearance at the store, so I tried some. And it really does extend the life of your produce, celery, lettuce. I've been taking a lot of my stuff now and popping it in there and put it in my vegetable drawer. But to answer your first question, no, I haven't. I can't imagine that you couldn't dehydrate it and use it in like a greens blend. I was going to talk about that a little bit. You can take your edible greens, like maybe you have way too much spinach or Swiss chard, or even edible weeds in your yard like lettuce, plantain, all that type of thing that you could eat, dandelion leaves. You can make a greens blend. You can dehydrate it and whisk it in like a food processor or a little blender, and you could put those in canning jars. And even if you don't have a dehydrator or you don't have, like, you're not able to seal them, by putting them in a jar, like in your case we were talking about, like a pickle jar or something, you're still preserving, you're not letting a lot of air get in. Or you can freeze them. I've had dried herbs that I just thrown in the freezer in a Ziploc bag, and they've kept a long time. For a couple years, they've kept just perfectly, like dried parsley and rosemary. They all dry very well and keep very well. So I really hate to throw any of that away. But, yeah, I can't see why, if you have a bumper crop of greens, why you can't dry them and then use them in your soups or your stews. Or I think you could probably use, like, if you powder them enough, you could use them like in a food smoothie too, a green smoothie.
Cathy, we're going into a break. This will be our final break for this hour. Would you tell us when we come back what your thoughts are on just taking, if you have green peppers, whether they be Anaheim, jalapeno, bell peppers, washing them, cutting them, and putting them in a freezer baggie and putting them in the freezer? Would you tell us what your thoughts are about that? Cathy's with us. She's in Ohio. This is her first class on USA Prepares. I want to thank you, Cathy. You've done an outstanding job. You really have. I mentioned peppers. So we have grown in our gardens for years bell peppers, Anaheim peppers, jalapeno peppers, a lot of different kinds of green peppers. And we've washed them on the outside with just water, dried them off, sliced them, removed the seeds, and put them in freezer baggies, Ziploc freezer baggies, and popped them in the freezer. Have you done anything like that?
Yes. I do that every year. I probably do, and I make sure I try to have enough to get me through the winter. What I do with mine is I do the same thing. I wash them off my core, and I give them to my lab. She loves peppers, so she gets the core. And but I'll take them and I'll cut them in big chunks, and I put them in. I have a Cuisinart food processor. Probably put them in like 1-inch, 2-inch chunks, and I just pulse each pepper like 2 or 3 times, and it chops it up very fine. And you can do is you can lay them on a cookie sheet and let them freeze in the freezer. What I'm doing now is I measure either half a cup or a cup, whichever. A cup is typically easier. I measure them in there, or I put 1 pepper. I mark it on the freezer bag. I lay them flat in the freezer, and then they'll stack really well. And then when I go to use them, I know that I've got 1 cup of chopped peppers. So if I only need a half a cup, then I can take half out. I wouldn't put them, like some people put them in a container and like they're all stuck together. it's really hard to get them out. They're all frozen. You have to let them thaw. Then you don't really know how much you have. So just a little tip, it saves you a step if you can mark your I use like the Ziploc freezer bags. And what I do is I lay them flat. I let them get hard. And then I put them a lot of times in the gallon-sized freezer bags just so I don't get any freezer burn on them. And I date them. And then I know each bag has 1 cup of chopped peppers. I do the same thing like for blueberries. When blueberries are in season, if I don't pick them, I might go buy 24, 30 pints. We've got a grower up in Michigan, and they run them on sale for like 89 cents a pint. I'll go buy like 24 of them. And then I do the same thing. I just wash them and lay them out flat or put them in a freezer bag. And then I use them all throughout the whole winter. And then they normally keep pretty well. You can keep them easily for a year that way.
You mentioned dehydrating onions. How do you do that, Cathy?
I just sliced them. I have a slicing blade on my food processor. I use the smallest blade. I try to, when my husband asks me what I want for Christmas, I ask for high-quality kitchen things because it saves me time. So I got a nice Cuisinart. I use they've got numbers on the blade, so I use one is the thinnest. I just slice them, and I just put them on the trays, and you have dehydrated onions. And then you could, same thing, you can put them in vegetable stock or you can put them in your soups or your stews or your soup, whatever type of thing you need onions for.
Cathy, you just mentioned something. You just mentioned something very interesting. I've got a notepad and I jot down notes, as we discuss things. And I wrote down just before you said this, so we're on the same page, appliances to consider. And I thought, the next broadcast that we do, I'd love it if you would discuss what appliances that we should consider getting. They don't have to be new. You can buy appliances used. I do. And, which ones you find that work, which ones should we just forget all about, what kind of knives and so forth. I think you have the answers to that. So would that be something that you'd be interested in discussing, in a future class with us?
Sure.
Okay. I'm thinking about the KitchenAid mixer, maybe some of the accessories or attachments to that. You mentioned the Cuisinart food processor. I'm thinking convection ovens, countertop convection ovens, turbo ovens, blenders, all kinds of knives that you like, why you like them, whether they be stainless steel, carbon steel, how you sharpen them. I mean, all kinds of tricks of the trade for the homemaker. And class, I think that the highest and best thing that a lady can do is raise the family and be that manager of the home. I really mean that. Be in charge of raising the children and managing the home. Hillary Clinton would disagree. She thinks that baking cookies is beneath her. But you know what? I don't think it's beneath Cathy or Mrs. Finelli. I think you can tell that Cathy's done an outstanding job protecting and defending her household economically and nutritionally. I can hear it in your voice, Cathy. So I want to thank you for being with us. I'm looking forward to broadcasting again. And if I were giving out grades, Cathy, you would certainly get an A for today's class. Incredible. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you for being with us. Class, coming up next hour, it's me, and I'll be giving you some of my thoughts. And if you'd like to call us and join me, you can do that. We'll pay for the call, 866-582-9933. Everyone all set? Cocked, locked, hour number 2 of USA Prepares class. You know that our country's under lockdown, and that's subject to change any second. But there is some good news. We now realize that our government is self-serving, incompetent, and me first. It is a do as I say, not as I do government at the federal level and at the state level and at the county level. And anyone who has been paying attention knows that we don't need 90% of our government employees, elected officials, parasites, nor their consultants. We don't need them. And what we have learned is that these government types allegedly are working from home. Obviously, they're not working from home. And I want you to know that in order to make sure that they themselves are safe, in Washington, D.C., there is a major general. His name is Jones. He's in charge of evacuation of the government from Washington, D.C., should there be civil unrest. Now, this plan has been in play since the attack in New York City, the World Trade Center, 9/11. It's been in play. But our government, our federal government, has got a plan to evacuate Washington, D.C., the city-state, should there be civil unrest. So I just want to let you know that you don't have to worry about them. They've already taken care of it. And before that, General Dwight David Eisenhower, when he became president, used his discretionary funds to build a hotel and a golf course in West Virginia. And it's in an area called White Sulphur Springs. The hotel and golf course is called the Greenbrier, Greenbrier. Underneath the Greenbrier, which was built in sections, compartmentalized, so no one really knew what was going on, there is a bunker underneath it. And it would hold about, all of Congress. No, not their families, just these Congress parasites. It has a television station, studio. It has a satellite communications antenna, a power generation station, diesel generators, water supply, a crematorium, meeting rooms, dining hall, everything you could possibly want to live underground. And to get there, Interstate 64, you can go 120 miles an hour on Interstate 64 from Virginia, through Virginia to West Virginia, into the mountains, the Appalachian Mountains, where this resort is. And since a number of us have found out about it, and it became declassified, you can look it up, Greenbrier. You can learn about it. But it was to protect the government from whatever happens. So there's another plan, a current plan, to do the same thing. It's not going to be at the Greenbrier because we already know about that. I got to the blast doors. I found the blast doors back in the 1990s. Took the family there. And as we approached the blast doors, the guards jumped out and said, what are you doing? I said, McDonald's is this way, right? Just trying to find McDonald's. They said, turn around. So I was there. I saw it. And there's a railroad line there, railroad tracks. So if you need to get there by rail from D.C., you could. If you need to go 120 miles an hour on Interstate 64, you could. And if you were landing your C-5 aircraft, you could land that on the parking lot right adjacent to the Greenbrier Hotel. So it's all right there. Everything that's necessary for the continuation of the United States federal government. So you can look it up. We have a plan right now to evacuate Washington, D.C. should there be civil unrest. Now, why would there be civil unrest? Because the coronavirus is real and has caused the corona panic. Rich Scheben's with us. Just joined us. Welcome, Rich Scheben.
Well, thank you, Vince. Happy TGIF to everybody. And, pardon me. The reason why I came on today is because I wanted to put a couple exclamation points on the discussion you had yesterday about economics. But I also want to finish what you said just a few moments ago about government. You left out the word corrupt. And I want to mention a few facts. The fact is that 90% of government workers in general, and not so much police, military, and firefighters, the people who put their life on the line, they don't. But 90% of government workers generally vote Democrat. And what they do is manufacture the perception of self-importance and self-preservation. And they do it very well. There's a lot of propaganda, a lot of hoaxes, a lot of false flags, a lot of lies and gaslighting that goes on. And that's why the fascist system that Donald Trump inherited between a corrupt big corporate oligarchy and government is totally out of control. And you can see the precedents that they are trying to start, everything from eliminating due process, creating liability protection for the big corporations, especially big pharma. You have people in government trying to create all the so-called vaccines, which is going to lower everybody's immune system, and they're going to get profits with no accountability. That's called free lunch. And you can see all these other agendas, getting rid of cash, getting rid of rallies, getting rid of Joe Biden publicly, let him go virtual reality so he doesn't sound like an idiot when he speaks. Closing the post office right before voting, panic, fear going through the roof, delegitimizing work, mail-in voting. Well, that's going to be very interesting when they want to try and close the post office. We have to look at all these agendas going on. Like here's an article right here that just came out on Zero Head. COVID-19 is a man-made virus. HIV discoverer says could only have been created in a lab. Well, you've heard that on this show and many alternative media shows for quite a long time. And this is a very disturbing article right here. Facebook is issuing warnings to users who have liked or clicked on coronavirus misinformation. In other words, they want to control the narrative. And when you look at the top 5 stocks, the real big stocks that's holding up the stock market, it's Microsoft, Apple, Amazon, Alphabet, a.k.a. Google, and Facebook, all owned by the wealthiest top few percent in the world for the purpose of the controlling information, propaganda, and mostly censorship and surveillance. So we have to be aware of everything that's going on right now, Vince, because nothing is real. We are really living in a virtual reality state. So before I mention some articles here, I want to go to what you were talking about yesterday. And we have to remember that when it comes to economics, there's always going to be revisions. Some countries, like China, doesn't even give revisions. They just say this is the narrative, take it or leave it. A lot of numbers are inaccurate. A lot of it's rigged. A lot of it's cherry-picking articles. And we have to look at the bottom line. We have to look at the bankruptcies, the defaults, and the delinquencies that's happening to the little people, especially with small business. And I have articles all over the place that basically shows that small business is not getting any relief. Basically, it's to keep up and prop up the big corporations and let everybody else, especially the middle class, go down the drain. So when you're doing, and I know I've talked about stock buybacks before and malinvestments, but there's so many of these companies who are getting double free lunch after breakfast and free lunch before dinner. And these people have not only done stock buybacks, but they're also asking for bailouts. So when you hear about food stamps and welfare, and I don't disagree with that it's not good for the public, I agree. But they're getting crumbs compared to the government and big corporate America, who are not just getting bailouts, but they've asked for stock buybacks. And I cannot say this enough. They're going into debt, and they're basically eliminating any possibility of expansion, new products, new services, research and development, and new people in the form of employees. So their executives cash in their stock options while creating acquisitions and mergers, which is code for consolidation, and they're giving dividends to their wealthiest stockholders, and they're sticking cash in their pockets, and then they're going to the government and asking for huge amounts of money in the form of bailouts, which the people are paying for. And this should be very disturbing. So when you hear about the mainstream media talking about there's no free lunch, big government, or government all across the board, is getting lots of free lunch. And the big banks, they're getting free money right now from the Treasury, charging the little people interest when they take out a loan. And then if somebody owes that bank money and they're getting a measly $1,200 stimulus check, that bank is taking it out of the pocket of that person who owes that bank. In other words, the bank is automatically putting themselves in first position. So when you talk about welfare lines, folks, Wall Street, big banks, big corporations, big government, they are first in welfare line compared to the bottom 93%. That's why the wealth gap is gaining ground. Okay, it probably should be revised maybe to the top to about 90%, 10%. I always talk 93%. But socialism is for the rich, the corrupt, and capitalism is for the poor who don't get opportunities. So we're trying to do commerce with very little head start. And everything regarding opportunities is now based on what group you're in. And what this is doing is eliminating the middle class. And I'm hearing a lot of people talking about debt jubilees. Vince, we can talk about that, and I know we have, because I'm going to repeat what I've said years ago. If we have household debt, say, let's say it's $50,000, okay, and you got to look at it from an individual perspective. Instead of doing a debt jubilee, because debt is money, that means a lot of people aren't going to get paid. If we can do it through a voucher system, okay, so we don't create a hyperinflationary system, we can literally give $50,000 to every person, every adult, or every household, or every business, preferably individuals. If you're in debt, you get it through a voucher, and that debt has to go to the person you owe the money to. And it can be done in increments so it doesn't overwhelm the system through inflation. And we'll be back after the break, folks. So little time, so much to say.
Let's talk about the post office for just a couple minutes. Class, in 1863, the price of a postage stamp was 3 cents for a half an ounce. In 1885, it was 2 cents for 1 ounce. 1885. In 1917, during the First World War, the price of postage went from 2 cents to 3 cents. And after the war, it went back down to 2 cents. Then, in 1932, it was still 3 cents for a first-class stamp. And it stayed that way. It stayed from November 1917 at 3 cents for a first-class postage stamp for 1 ounce, all the way until 1958. What would that be? 39 years? Then it went from 3 cents to 4 cents in 1958. And then in 1974, it went to 10 cents. Now I'm skipping some of these jumps. So here are the postage rate increases. We'll start in 1930. 1932 was 3 cents. 1958, 4 cents. 63, 5 cents. 68, 6 cents. 71, 8 cents. And 71 is when it about started going crazy. So 74, it went 10 cents. 75, 13 cents. That's a 30% increase. Then 78, it went to 15 cents, 18 cents, 20 cents, 22, 25, 29, 32, 33, 34, 37, 39, 41, 42, 44, 45, 46, 49, 50, and now it's 55 cents. That's for a first-class postage stamp. The United States Post Office is on the United States Postal Service is on the verge of collapse. And if they don't receive a massive, massive bailout, I think it's around just close to $90 billion with a B dollars, they're going to collapse. Why? They have pensions that they're paying. They pay their employees way too much. And they say that the corona panic has caused a decrease in profitable items, such as first-class mail, flyers, those kinds of things. So because of flyers, first-class mail, small items, they are in deep, deep, deep financial trouble. How is that possible? It's a quasi-government organization, right? They can charge whatever they want. And yet they're still fiscally irresponsible. Now, President Donald Trump has said that the United States Postal Service is the delivery boy for Jeff Bezos. I'm paraphrasing. Yeah, so you wonder how come Amazon can ship so inexpensively when you couldn't put something in a box and ship it across your street for what Jeff Bezos can sell you the product and ship it for, right? That's what's happening. So it seems like y'all are subsidizing the United States Postal Service. It's just one more thing that's wrong. So when you wonder why he's so wealthy, it's because he's not paying his fair share the way you are. You know, imagine going to your local Postal Service building and say, I want the same rate that Jeff Bezos pays because I'm going to ship this to my aunt in Kentucky and I'm sending her a frying pan and I want the same rate that Amazon pays you. What do you think they would say? First, they tell you they don't know what that means, and they can't calculate that because he's cut a special deal with the United States Postal Service. Now, he's bright. He was able to pull that off. No one would think in those kinds of terms of taking advantage of the little people. You know, we're not built like that. Say, you know what, we could take advantage of a whole bunch of little people by having them pay for our shipping costs. We'll just cut a side deal with the United States Postal Service. Rich, any quick comments about that?
Well, yeah. Keep in mind the little people pay for everything via taxes or inflation. Keep that in mind. This year, folks, this spring, summer, and fall is going to tell us if America survives.
Yeah. A stamp went up 10% between 2018 and 2019. 10% in 1 year. We'll be right back. In Louisiana, there's a pastor by the name of Tony Spell. And in an interview earlier this month, he was unapologetic when he was asked if he thought that he would have blood on his hands if one of his congregants became infected and died. And he said, like any revolutionary or any zealot or like any pure religious person, death looks to them like a welcome friend, he said. True Christians do not mind dying. They fear living in fear. Police arrested Tony Spell on March 31st and charged him with 6 misdemeanors for violating the governor's executive order that limits gatherings to less than 10 people. At the time, Central Police Chief Roger Corcoran called Spell's decision to keep holding services reckless and irresponsible. The number of infections in Louisiana has increased to more than 21,000, and the death toll is now over 1,100 in Louisiana. This is on the Daily Mail. And here's the headline for what I just read you. Parishioner and right-hand man of controversial Pastor Tony Spell, who has defied lockdown measures, dies from coronavirus. Harold Aurelian was a member of the Life Tabernacle Church in Louisiana. Pastor Spell disputed the cause of death, saying he died from a broken heart. Spell is facing misdemeanor charges for holding services during the corona pandemic. So one of his church members died. And Pastor Spell said he disputed the cause of death. The coroner's cause of death was acute respiratory illness syndrome due to the coronavirus. Pastor Spell says he disputed the man's cause of death, saying he died of a broken heart after recently losing his son. So here we have a praise the Lord guy who is expecting donations from his flock He holds a service. Thousands attend. One at least has died so far. And the pastor disputes the cause of death that the coroner said. And I believe that this is the same Bible-thumping preacher that said, y'all, we're having trouble getting people to attend services, so y'all just give us your $1,200 check. I think he's the same guy. Same guy that said, just turn over your checks to the churches, in your area. Can you imagine that? What a disgrace. I hope the charges get increased to manslaughter for this guy. Where does he get off? Where does he get off defying the order for safety? Okay? Just like the protesters across the country. I think it's wonderful that people protest. I really do. And the protesters across the country are saying, we're smart enough to know how to handle ourselves. We don't need to be locked down. And yet they're shoulder to shoulder with people without masks during their protests. Now, I think you have the right to do whatever you want. If you want to kill yourself, I think you have the right to do it. But don't make a mess for the rest of us to clean up. And don't infect us with a disease just because you're reckless and stupid. And I also believe that the only way to stop this thing is to let it die out by quarantine. That's my belief. Not only do I believe it, I am practicing it. That's where we are at the farm. And we are being forced to sell our herd, about 70% of our herd, in order to save our farm. That's what we have to do. And I was talking to a guy yesterday, and I said, it's going to be really difficult. I said, I know you want to buy some of our cows, and I think that's wonderful, but here's how it's going to have to be, and you may not like this. What we will do is we'll take some pictures of those cows. We'll take a video of those cows. We will email you those pictures and the video. And if you like the cows and we all agree on a price, we will put them in our trailer and we will bring them to you. And we will drop them off and you'll pay us. That's how we'll do it. You cannot come to the farm. We are under lockdown. We will not let anyone on our farm because we don't want our cats, dogs, cattle, or us infected. We won't do it. Those are the terms. What do you think? And everybody I talked to, the phone was ringing off the hook yesterday. Everybody I talked to said that'd be fine. Rich, any comments about that?
Well, I think the powers that be, especially on the left, Vince, don't want to have this infection stop. Now, is this a real virus? I always say, of course it is. But at the same time, I think we don't need tyrannical tyranny to run our show. Let me give you a couple of examples here. First article, Democrats demand Trump stop building border wall during coronavirus crisis. Well, we all know the Democrats need illegal immigrants for the voting. However, if they are really serious about reducing virus contagion, they would be all for a border wall and no people unvetted coming through our border. Next article right here. U.S. has reportedly flown in over 1,000 Afghan refugees in the last 4 weeks. Does that sound to you like they want to stop the infection? Next article. CIA secretly told staff, okay, paid by American taxpayers, secretly told staff COVID-19 drug touted by Trump might cause sudden death. So there's a lot of information, and I think the people are getting tired of all the lies going on. International flights bringing 100,000 unchecked travelers to UK each week. I don't think the powers that be want to, especially the Democrats. They want to keep this infection going so they can create the agenda of getting rid of cash and rallies and virtual reality Joe Biden and delegitimizing work and doing mail-in voting and creating more fear and panic. I think this is part of their game plan. But tyranny. There's a county named Valley County in Montana, over in eastern Montana. It's over by Glasgow and Fort Peck, and they had a beta test shoved down their throats where they said if you don't get tested, if you don't do what we say, if you don't wear pink armbands to prove that you went through the system, you're not going to be able to do commerce or have freedom. Well, the people of Valley County, congratulations, because they shoved it right back down the government's throat. They're not going to put up with that kind of tyranny. And I think I'm seeing examples all across the nation, Vince, that people are getting sick and tired of this police state, social engineering, forced precedents being shoved down America's throats. And I really think that the next few months is going to make all the difference in the world regarding the survival of America. Either enough people are going to wake up and do something about it, or we are going to be in a tyrannical, totalitarian, socialist/communist state where no prosperity, no middle class. You'll be told what to do, what to say, how to think, and you'll be getting your vaccinations to destroy your immune system, and it's going to be a major depopulation event. So we have to decide as Americans, for the over a million combat soldiers who gave their life for us, for our freedoms and liberties. I mean, the governor of New Jersey just said the other day he wasn't thinking of the Bill of Rights or the Constitution. He said this. Well, the Bill of Rights and Constitution, Governor, is the law of the land. That's called the rule of law. That's why you always hear me say that we have to have the same rules, laws, and accountability for everybody, not different ones for different aristocracy or different groups or hyphens or pronouns. We all have to be Americans. We have to be Americans desperately. We can't have any more apathy, indifference, or ignorance running the show. We have to remember all the people who gave their life for our freedoms and liberties. And if we drop the ball, their lives, their deaths will be for naught. It's up to us, Vince.
6 weeks and 2 days ago, President Donald Trump was on stage. He was on almost every American television. And he said that there were 15 cases of infection of, I'm paraphrasing, of the coronavirus. 15. Not 1,500, not 15,000, 15. Today, 671,000 people are infected. Now, those are just the ones that have been counted. And I believe that that number is way low because they're not counting everybody. Now, how many people have died? And I've heard so many stories about more people die in automobile accidents and abortions and so forth. Well, I've heard that. I've read that. So in the, the death record in 24 hours now in the United States, 4,591 in 24 hours. So this thing's got legs, and this thing is increasing at an increasing rate. Increasing at an increasing rate. It's absolutely clear to me that there's no stopping it without a quarantine. So when people are running around just because they feel they have the right to, it's reckless to me. It's dangerous to me. And as I mentioned, we have to sell cows because we can't feed them. We can't feed our cows. Someone who used to be a friend of mine reneged on a deal, on an agreement, on an oral contract. And we were maintaining his farm. In return, we got to use his grass. And we manicured that farm, and he was going to move into it, and he decided, he's not going to do it anymore. And with no warning whatsoever, decided that he was going to unilaterally renege on that deal, on that agreement, on that oral contract. So I have to sell cows. And what I'm trying to say is this is going to happen to you. This is just, our turn in the barrel. This is going to happen to you too, class. You're going to find that people are not worth the words they use. And you're going to have to determine whether you are going to help them or not. In my case, the answer is absolutely, positively no. I won't help them anymore. I won't. And we, in order to sell these cows, we have to do it in a way that we're not letting people on the property. But that's not the way it used to be. Farmers would look at the cows and say, I'll take that one, that one, that one, those numbers by the ear tags. Not anymore. They're going to have to do it from a distance. That's the new normal and the new morality. Class, let me put this number in perspective. I mentioned that 4,591 people have died in 24 hours, according to the Wall Street Journal. That's 3.2 people every minute. Let me say it a different way. That's one person dying every 20 seconds. Does that seem like this virus is real? Does it? I was advised to listen to a broadcast, and I don't like listening to broadcasts because I really don't like the way most broadcasts are conducted. People unprepared sit behind the microphone and just start talking. I guess that's okay for coffee chat or something like that. But maybe around the kitchen table. But here at USA Prepares, we like to be prepared. I tuned into this broadcast for just a couple minutes. It was all I could stomach. And I heard that this virus is a hoax. That's what the talk show host said. And I'm now using the term talk show host to delineate between someone who knows what they're talking about and someone who just talks. Talk show hosts. When Rich Scheben comes on the air with me, he does a lot of research, an enormous amount of research. He's not a talk show host. Or a talk show co-host. Or when he fills in for me, he's not a fill-in talk show host. He does a lot of research. And when we broadcast with Dr. Norman Shealy, he's not a talk show host either. He's a medical doctor. And Gwyneth Isaacs is a degreed scientist. So we're not talk show hosts. We speak based on experience. And it just frosts me when people say that this is a hoax. Robert in Kansas, welcome.
Hey, good morning, gentlemen. I wanted to warn the class that the tests for the coronavirus have been found to be contaminated with that very same disease. And so you might go get your test and wind up getting sick afterwards. Also,
Robert, that's a very interesting thought. That's something I have not read about, but it makes a lot of sense. It really does. It's it's akin to the same theory that if you don't have the coronavirus, but you get the immunization for it, you'll get the coronavirus. Just as in the past, if you got your flu shot, you would be almost certain to get the flu. I'm talking about the plain old, survivable type flu, right? Isn't it that the same thing that you're talking about, or very similar?
Yes, sir, absolutely. And I'm not a medical doctor, but I do have a background in biology. And you have these things in your bodies called exomes. And so if you've recently fought off the common cold, you will have an exome in your body, potentially a corona exome, nothing to do with the coronavirus. And when you are, let's say you die, and you have this corona exome in your body, which I would say almost all of us do, if you've ever had the common cold, then you could be considered to have died from coronavirus. If they test you for it, it doesn't matter what you died of. You'd have your head cut off. And they say, oh, he had coronavirus because these exomes are in his body. So that's one reason why the numbers are so high. You'll also notice all the numbers for heart disease, all these things that people normally die from, all those things are down when these coronaviruses are way up. So it's a very interesting thing I think we have going on with the deception and and what they're trying to push us into, which is mandatory vaccinations, which will be a digital currency, guys. I mean, it's literally the mark of the beast, and you won't be able to walk into a store without having these nanotech things running through your blood. So, we're in a real scary situation. Do not take the test. Do not take the vaccine. That's really what this is all about, is to get that into your body.
Robert, I don't know if you were listening yesterday, but if you were, did you hear me talk about the protocol for handing over your rifle, pistol, shotgun, revolver? Did you hear me talk about that?
Yes, Vincent, I did, and you left off one part of it. You want to know what that is? The last part.
I don't know.
You got
wear earplugs.
you got to give them all your rounds first. Then you can turn it over. So you had everything right except that last part that you got to your ammunition. You got to turn that over as well.
Yeah, and you might want to wear earplugs or hearing protection when you hand over your rifle, because I shot a snake with my .45 years ago, and my ears were ringing for 3 days. So, yeah. So Robert, you're in the same camp that you'll turn over your rifle, pistol, revolver, shotgun when you're out of ammunition. Is that what you're saying?
Well, yeah, that's the only right way to do it. You want to comply.
Rich Scheben, any thoughts?
No, I mentioned what Robert said was very accurate today, and I did mention that on Tuesday, like Dr. Annie Bukacek saying that a lot of these tests are false positives. A lot of the tests are giving people the virus. I've mentioned that weeks ago. That is accurate information.
There you go, class. So here's what we know. We know that we're being lied to on lots of different levels. So do your own research, make your own decisions, but be very careful.